The doctor's words still echoed in Catherine Hartwell's mind 3 years later, though she had stopped believing them the moment her father's face went pale with fear. One more fall from a horse could paralyze her, or worse. She had been 15 then, recovering from a riding accident that had left her unconscious for 2 days. And her family had made their decree absolute. No more horses, no more riding, no more freedom. Now 18 and suffocating under the weight of their protection, Catherine stood at the fence of her father's ranch outside Tucson, Arizona Territory, in the spring of 1882, watching the horses run and feeling like a prisoner in her own life. The ranch stretched across the desert landscape, sprawling and prosperous, a monument to her father's success in cattle and copper mining. Catherine had grown up in the saddle before the accident, racing her brothers across the scrubland, helping drive cattle, feeling the wind whip through her hair as she galloped under the endless sky. That girl seemed like someone from another lifetime now. Her mother kept her close to the house, teaching her embroidery and piano, preparing her for a proper marriage to some merchant or banker who would keep her safely indoors. The very thought made Catherine's chest tighten with panic. She heard the hoofbeats before she saw him, a lone rider coming up the dusty road that led to the main house. The man sat easy in the saddle, his dark hat pulled low against the morning sun, and even from a distance, Catherine could see the confidence in the way he handled his horse. She should have gone inside, should have followed the rules her mother had laid down about greeting strange men, but something kept her rooted to the spot as he approached. He reined in his bay, gelding a few feet from the fence, touching the brim of his hat in greeting. "Morning, miss. I'm looking for Thomas Hartwell. Heard he might be hiring ranch hands." Catherine found herself staring at eyes the color of summer grass, set in a face weathered by sun and wind but young, maybe 23 or 24. A scar cut through his left eyebrow, giving him a roguish look that made her heart skip strangely. "My father's in the south pasture. You can wait at the bunkhouse if you want or ride out to meet him." The cowboy swung down from his saddle with fluid grace, landing lightly in the dust. He was tall and lean, all muscle and economy of movement, and when he smiled at her the whole desert seemed to brighten. "I'll wait if that's all right. Been riding since dawn and Rusty here could use some water." He gestured to his horse, then extended his hand over the fence. "Name's Jake Morrison, from up Colorado way originally." She hesitated only a moment before taking his hand, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip. "Catherine Hartwell. There's a trough by the barn, I can show you." As they walked, Jake leading his horse, Catherine felt acutely aware of how close he was, how the leather and sage smell of him mixed with the dust and sun. He moved like someone who had spent his whole life outdoors, comfortable in his own skin in a way she envied desperately. She caught him glancing at her, his expression curious but respectful. "You don't sound like someone who spends all her time doing needlepoint," Jake said, a hint of amusement in his voice. "You know horses." Catherine felt herself flush, pleased that he had noticed. "I used to ride. Before my accident, my family decided it was too dangerous after I got thrown and hit my head. They think I'm fragile now." Something shifted in Jake's expression, a flash of understanding that surprised her. "Are you fragile, I mean?" The question, asked so directly, caught her off guard. No one had ever asked her that before. They had all simply decided for her, wrapped her in cotton wool, and expected her to accept it. "No," she said quietly, surprised by the conviction in her own voice. "I don't think I am, but they won't hear it. My mother nearly fainted when I suggested maybe I could just ride slowly, stay close to the house. My father said absolutely not, and that was the end of it." Jake was quiet for a moment as Rusty drank deeply from the trough. When he looked at her again, his green eyes were serious. "That's a hard thing, being told you can't do what you love. Must feel like losing a part of yourself." Catherine felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back fiercely. "Every single day," she whispered. "I watch them run and it's like I can't breathe properly anymore. Does that sound ridiculous?" "No, ma'am. Sounds like the most sensible thing I've heard in a long time. Jake's voice was gentle, and when he smiled at her again, Catherine felt something shift in her chest, like a door opening that she had thought was locked forever. Her brother James rode up then, breaking the spell, his eyes narrowing when he saw Catherine talking to a stranger. "Catherine, Mother's looking for you. You, Cowboy, state your business." The rest of that day, Catherine moved through her chores in a daze, her mind returning again and again to green eyes and a smile that had made her feel seen for the first time in 3 years. She learned at dinner that her father had hired Jake Morrison, impressed by his references and experience with horses. He would be staying in the bunkhouse, working with the remuda and helping with the spring cattle drive north. Catherine's heart leaped at the news, even as she kept her expression carefully neutral. Over the following weeks, she found excuses to be near the corrals when Jake was working. She would bring lemonade to the hands on hot afternoons, or walk out to sketch the landscape, always ending up where she could watch him gentle a fractious horse or practice his roping. He never treated her like she was made of glass. Instead, he would stop to talk, asking her opinion on a horse's temperament, or telling her stories about his travels through Colorado and New Mexico territory. "I grew up on a small ranch outside Denver," Jake told her one afternoon as they sat in the shade of the barn, Catherine supposedly there to shell peas but really just listening to his voice. "Lost my folks to influenza when I was 19. Sold the place because I couldn't work it alone and have been moving ever since, looking for something that feels like home again." Catherine's heart ached for him. "That must be lonely," Jake shrugged, but she could see the shadow in his eyes. "You get used to it." "But yeah, sometimes I wonder what it would be like to have roots again, to build something that lasts." He looked at her then, and the intensity of his gaze made her breath catch. "What about you, Catherine? What do you want if you could have anything?" No one had ever asked her that either. Catherine set down the bowl of peas, her hands trembling slightly. "I want to feel alive again. I want to ride across the desert at sunset and feel like I'm part of the world instead of just watching it through a window. I want to matter, to do something real instead of just waiting to be married off to someone who sees me as a decoration." The words tumbled out before she could stop them, raw and honest in a way she had never been with anyone. Jake was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. Then he stood, dusting off his jeans, and held out his hand to her. "Come with me." Catherine let him pull her to her feet, her heart pounding. "Where are we going? You'll see. Trust me." She followed him to the corral where he kept his horses. Rusty stood near the fence, but it was the mare in the corner that caught Catherine's attention. She was beautiful, a dappled gray with intelligent dark eyes and a graceful arch to her neck. Jake had been working with her for the past week, and Catherine had watched enviously as the mare responded to his gentle handling. "This is Silver," Jake said, moving to stroke the mare's nose. "She's the best horse I've ever owned, sweet-tempered, smooth gait, smart as they come. Been thinking she needs a real rider, someone who understands her." He turned to look at Catherine, and his expression made her heart stop. "Someone like you." Catherine's mouth went dry. "Jake, I can't. My family would never allow it if they found out. Then we make sure they don't find out." Jake moved closer, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his green eyes. "Catherine, I've been watching you these past weeks, and I see how you look at these horses. You're dying inside a little more every day. That's no way to live. So here's what I'm thinking. Tomorrow's Sunday. Your family goes to church in town, stays for the social afterward. You could say you're not feeling well, stay home. I'll tell your father I'm checking fence lines in the north section. And instead, you and I take Silver out for a ride. Just an hour, maybe 2. Let you remember what it feels like." It was madness. It was dangerous. If her family found out, there would be consequences beyond anything she could imagine. Her father might fire Jake. Her mother would probably lock her in her room. But as Catherine looked at the mare, then back at Jake's earnest face, she felt something fierce and wild stir in her chest, something that had been sleeping for 3 years. "All right," she whispered. "Yes, let's do it." Jake's smile was like sunrise. That's my girl. Meet me by the north gate an hour after they leave for town. Where something you can ride in and bring water. We'll take it slow, I promise. I won't let anything happen to you. Catherine barely slept that night, her mind racing with excitement and terror in equal measure. She kept touching the riding skirt she had hidden in the back of her wardrobe, the one her mother didn't know she had kept. By the time Sunday morning arrived, her nerves were stretched so tight she thought she might snap. The performance she put on at breakfast would have impressed a theater troupe. She pushed her food around her plate, pressed a hand to her forehead, and when her mother felt her cheek and found it warm with genuine nervous fever, the decision was made. Catherine would stay home and rest while the family went to church. Her mother left detailed instructions with the cook about broth and cool cloths, kissed Catherine's forehead, and finally, mercifully, departed with the rest of the family in the wagon. Catherine waited exactly 3 minutes after they disappeared down the road before racing to her room to change. Her hands shook as she buttoned the riding skirt, pulled on her boots, found an old hat of her brother's to keep the sun off. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the flushed, bright-eyed girl staring back. She looked alive. Jake was waiting at the north gate as promised, Silver already saddled, another horse standing ready beside her. When he saw Catherine approaching, his smile was warm enough to melt her fears. "You came." "I almost lost my nerve a dozen times." Catherine stopped in front of Silver, reaching out tentatively to stroke the mare's neck. The horse whickered softly, nuzzling her hand, and Catherine felt tears sting her eyes. "Hello, beautiful girl, I've missed this so much." Jake moved to stand beside her, his voice gentle. "We're going to take this real easy. Silver's as gentle as they come, but you haven't ridden in 3 years, so we'll walk first, let you get your seat back. If at any point you want to stop, you just say the word. This is about you remembering what you love, not proving anything to anybody. All right." Catherine nodded, not trusting her voice. Jake helped her mount, his hands steady on her waist as he lifted her into the saddle, and then Catherine was sitting on a horse for the first time in 3 years, and the world shifted back into focus. She took the reins in hands that remembered how to hold them, felt Silver shift beneath her, and something that had been broken inside her began to mend. They walked the horses away from the ranch, heading north into the open desert where the saguaros stood like sentinels and the mountains rose purple in the distance. Jake kept pace beside her, close enough to reach her if she needed him, but giving her space to find her balance. And Catherine remembered. Her body remembered the rhythm of the horse's gait, the way to move with the animal instead of against it, the feeling of connection and partnership that made riding something more than just transportation. "You're doing great," Jake said, and the pride in his voice made her glow. "Want to try a trot?" Catherine's heart leaped with excitement and fear, but the excitement won. "Yes, please." They picked up the pace, moving into an easy trot, and Catherine felt Silver respond to her signals like they had been riding together for years. The wind caught her hat and sent it flying, and she laughed, actually laughed with pure joy, the sound carrying across the empty desert. Jake whooped beside her, grinning like a fool, and for that moment everything else fell away. There was only the sun and the sky and the powerful grace of the horse beneath her and the man riding at her side. When they finally slowed to a walk again, Catherine's face ached from smiling. "Thank you," she said, looking at Jake with eyes that threatened to overflow. "Thank you for giving this back to me. I didn't realize how much of myself I'd lost until just now." Jake reached across the space between their horses and took her hand, his grip warm and solid. "You never lost it, Catherine. It was always there, just waiting for the right moment to come back." He paused, seeming to struggle with something, then continued. "I need to tell you something. I've been working for your father for a month now, and every day I tell myself I should keep my distance, should be professional, should remember that you're the boss's daughter and I'm just a hired hand. And every day I fail completely because, Catherine, I'm falling in love with you." The world stopped. Catherine stared at him, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Jake's face was open, vulnerable, his green eyes searching hers. "I know it's too soon," he continued quickly. "I know your family would never approve. I know I don't have much to offer beyond a horse and a bedroll and wandering feet. But I had to tell you because riding out here with you today, seeing you come alive like this, I realized I'd do anything to see that expression on your face every single day for the rest of my life. You don't have to say anything back. I just needed you to know." Catherine felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down at a jump that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. She thought about the life her parents had planned for her, safe and suffocating and small. She thought about the way Jake looked at her, like she was brave and capable and worth listening to. She thought about this moment, sitting on a horse in the middle of the desert with the sun on her face and her heart beating wild and free. "I love you too," she said, and watched Jake's face transform with joy. "I think I started falling the first day we met, when you asked me if I was really fragile. You're the first person in 3 years who's seen me instead of just seeing something that needs to be protected. Jake Morrison, I love you, and I don't know how we're going to make this work, but I know I can't go back to the way things were before." Jake dismounted in one fluid motion, then reached up to help Catherine down. The moment her feet touched the ground, he pulled her into his arms, and kissing him was like coming home and setting out on an adventure all at once. He tasted like coffee and hope, and when he finally pulled back, both of them were breathing hard. "We'll figure it out," Jake promised, cupping her face in his hands. "I don't know how yet, but we will. I'm not losing you, Catherine, not to fear, not to other people's rules, not to anything." They rode back to the ranch in the early afternoon, arriving with time for Catherine to change before her family returned from town. Jake helped her down from Silver's back, his hands lingering on her waist, and they shared one more kiss before Catherine slipped away toward the house. She felt like she was glowing from the inside out, transformed by freedom and by love, but their secret couldn't last forever. It was James who caught them 2 weeks later. Catherine and Jake had fallen into a pattern of stolen moments, meeting before dawn when the ranch was still sleeping, or finding each other in the barn after dinner when Catherine claimed she wanted to sketch by lamplight. They had been careful, or thought they had been, but James had apparently been watching, suspicious of how much time his sister spent wandering the ranch grounds. He found them in the barn on a Thursday evening, Catherine sitting on a hay bale while Jake taught her to braid a hackamore, their heads close together, his hand covering hers as he guided her fingers through the pattern. James's roar of fury sent the barn cats scattering. "Get away from my sister." Jake stood immediately, putting himself between Catherine and her brother. "James, it's not what you think." "Not what I think. I think I just found a hired hand taking liberties with my sister. I think my father is going to have you horsewhipped before he throws you off this ranch." James's face was mottled red with rage, his fists clenched at his sides. Catherine stepped around Jake, her own anger rising to meet her brother's. "Stop it, James. Jake hasn't done anything wrong. We're friends. We talk. That's all. Friends." James laughed bitterly. "You think I'm stupid." "I've seen the way you look at him, Catherine, and I've seen him sneaking you out to ride, though you thought no one knew about that either." Catherine's blood ran cold. "You've been spying on us. I've been protecting you from your own foolishness. You know what the doctor said. You could have been killed, and here you are gallivanting around the desert with this drifter, lying to mother and father, making a spectacle of yourself." James pointed at Jake. "You're finished here, Morrison. Pack your gear and be gone by morning, or I'll make sure everyone in the territory knows what kind of man you are." Jake's jaw tightened, but when he spoke his voice was level. "I'll leave if that's what your father decides, but I won't leave Catherine alone to face this. She deserves to be heard." "She deserves to be safe," James shot back. "Something you clearly don't care about, putting her on a horse when you know she's forbidden to ride. If she'd been hurt, if she'd fallen." "I didn't fall." Catherine's shout silenced both men. She was shaking with fury and fear, but she stood her ground. I've been riding with Jake for 2 weeks, James, and I haven't fallen once because I'm not fragile and I'm not broken and I'm tired of being treated like I am. I had one accident 3 years ago, and everyone has used it as an excuse to keep me locked away like some princess in a tower. Well, I'm done with it. I'm 18 years old and I have a right to make my own choices. James stared at her like he'd never seen her before. Wait until Father hears about this. You'll be lucky if he doesn't send you to Aunt Margaret in Boston. He turned and strode from the barn, leaving Catherine and Jake in ringing silence. Catherine felt her knees go weak and Jake caught her, pulling her against his chest. "I'm sorry," she whispered against his shirt. "I'm so sorry, he's going to fire you and it's all my fault. Hey, look at me." Jake tilted her chin up until their eyes met. "None of this is your fault. I knew the risks when I saddled Silver that first Sunday. I'd do it all again, Catherine, every single moment because you were worth it. You are worth it." "What are we going to do?" Jake was quiet for a moment, his expression turning thoughtful. "We could run. Tonight, before your father can make his decision, I've got some money saved. We could head west to California or north to Colorado. Start fresh where no one knows us." The suggestion sent a thrill of terror and excitement through Catherine's chest. Run away with Jake, leave everything she'd ever known behind, trade security for freedom and love. A month ago, she would have thought it impossible. Now, after weeks of remembering who she really was, after falling completely in love with a cowboy who saw her as his equal, it seemed like the only real choice. "If we run, we'll be running forever," Catherine said slowly. "My father will look for us. He has friends in every town, business partners everywhere. We'd always be looking over our shoulders. Then we face him. We tell him the truth that we love each other and want to be together. Maybe he'll surprise you, maybe he'll understand." Catherine shook her head sadly. "You don't know my father. He's a good man, but he's stubborn and he's protective and he's already decided what my future should look like. It doesn't include a ranch hand with no property and no connections." She took a deep breath, making her decision. "But I choose you anyway, Jake. If we have to run, then we run. If we have to fight, then we fight. Just promise me we do it together." Jake kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "Together, always, I promise." They didn't have to wait long for the reckoning. Catherine's father stormed into the barn less than an hour later, James trailing behind him, and the fury in Thomas Hartwell's face made Catherine's stomach drop. But she stood straight, Jake's hand in hers, and refused to cower. "Is it true?" Her father's voice was like thunder. "Have you been riding behind my back, with him?" "Yes, sir." Catherine forced herself to meet his eyes. "Jake has been teaching me to ride again, and I've been fine, father, more than fine. I've been happy for the first time in 3 years. Happy, you could have been killed. You could have hit your head again and this time not woken up at all." Thomas turned his glare on Jake. "And you, I trusted you. I hired you in good faith, and you repay me by defying my direct orders and endangering my daughter." Jake's voice was respectful but firm. "With respect, sir, I didn't endanger her. I've been around horses my whole life, and I know how to keep a rider safe. We went slow, stayed on good terrain, and Silver's the steadiest mare I've ever owned. I understand you want to protect Catherine, but maybe it's time to ask her what she wants instead of deciding for her." Thomas's face went an alarming shade of purple. "You presume to tell me how to handle my own daughter." "I presume to suggest that she's 18 years old and capable of making her own decisions." Jake's composure cracked slightly. "I know I'm just a hired hand, Mr. Hartwell, and I know I've got no right to speak to you this way. But I love your daughter and she loves me, and we're asking you to respect that." The silence that followed was deafening. Catherine watched her father's expression cycle through shock, disbelief, and something that might have been pain. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter but no less hard. "You have until tomorrow morning to leave this ranch. I'll pay you through the end of the month, but I don't want to see your face after sunrise." He turned to Catherine, and the disappointment in his eyes cut her deeper than his anger had. "And you, young lady, will confine yourself to the house until I decide what's to be done with you. We'll discuss this further when your mother and I have had time to think. Father, please. Catherine started, but he held up a hand. I don't want to hear it right now, Catherine. I'm too angry to have this conversation without saying things I'll regret. Go to the house. Now. Catherine looked at Jake, her heart breaking. He squeezed her hand once, then let go. It's all right. Do as he says. We're not finished, Catherine, I promise you that. The walk back to the house felt like walking to her own execution. Her mother was waiting in the parlor, her face pale, and when she saw Catherine, she burst into tears. How could you be so foolish, so reckless? Do you have any idea what could have happened? Nothing happened, Mother. I was perfectly safe. You don't understand. Her mother gripped her hands, and Catherine was shocked to see real terror in her eyes. When you fell 3 years ago, when you wouldn't wake up, I thought I'd lost you. I thought my baby girl was going to die, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. For 2 days, I sat by your bed and prayed harder than I've ever prayed in my life, and when you finally opened your eyes, I made a promise that I would never let anything hurt you again. Don't you see? I can't lose you, Catherine. I can't. For the first time, Catherine understood that her parents' restrictions came not from a desire to control her, but from a place of genuine, bone-deep fear. It didn't make it right, didn't make it any easier to breathe under the weight of their protection, but it reframed everything she thought she knew. Mother, Catherine said gently, you're not going to lose me, but you have to let me live. I can't spend the rest of my life wrapped in cotton wool, afraid of every risk. That's not living, that's just existing, and I love you, but I can't do it anymore. Her mother pulled her into a tight embrace, and they both cried, 3 years of fear and frustration spilling out in the dim parlor. When they finally pulled apart, her mother cupped Catherine's face in her hands. This cowboy, this Jake Morrison, do you really love him? With all my heart, Catherine whispered. He sees me, Mother, not the girl who fell, not someone who needs to be protected, but me, the real me. And he makes me want to be brave. Her mother closed her eyes for a long moment, struggling with something internal. Your father won't allow it, you know he won't. He has plans for you, hopes that involve stability and security and a man with prospects. I know. But I choose Jake anyway, even if it means leaving everything else behind. That night, Catherine lay awake in her room, staring at the ceiling and trying to figure out what to do next. Jake was leaving in the morning. If she didn't act, she might never see him again. Her father would probably send her to Boston as James had threatened, marry her off to some friend's son who saw her as a prize rather than a person. The thought made her feel like she was suffocating. Sometime after midnight, a pebble tapped against her window. Catherine's heart leaped as she rushed to open it, finding Jake in the garden below, his face illuminated by moonlight. Come with me, he called up softly. Right now. I've got the horses ready, supplies packed. We can be in New Mexico territory by tomorrow afternoon, California in a few weeks. Say yes, Catherine. Choose this. Choose us. Catherine looked back at her room, at the life she had always known. Then she looked at Jake, at the future stretching out wild and uncertain and full of possibility. Her parents would be devastated. They might never forgive her. But she thought about what she had told her mother, about living instead of just existing, about being brave. Give me 5 minutes, she whispered back. She dressed quickly in her riding clothes, stuffed a few precious belongings into a small bag, and wrote a letter to her parents that she left on her pillow. In it, she tried to explain what Jake meant to her, what freedom meant, what love meant when it was real and fierce and honest. She told them she loved them, that she hoped someday they would understand, and that she would write when she could. Then she climbed out the window and into the future. Jake caught her as she dropped from the garden trellis, his arms strong and sure around her. Are you certain? Once we leave, there's no going back, not easily. I'm certain. You, me, and Silver, that's all I need. They rode through the night, pushing hard to put distance between themselves and the ranch. Jake had planned their route carefully, aiming for Tucson first to catch a train west, then on to California where they could lose themselves in the gold country or the farmlands of the Central Valley. As the sun rose behind them, painting the desert in shades of rose and gold, Catherine felt more alive than she had in years. This was terrifying and exhilarating and absolutely right. In Tucson, they sold one of the horses for traveling money and boarded a westbound train, keeping their heads down and their conversation quiet. Jake had registered them at the ticket office as Mr. and Mrs. Morrison, and Catherine wore a simple gold band he had bought from a jeweler on a side street. It wasn't legal yet, but it felt real, a promise they were making to each other. "We'll get properly married as soon as we can," Jake said as the train rattled westward through Arizona territory. "I want to do this right, Catherine. I want you to be my wife in truth, not just in name." Catherine leaned her head on his shoulder, watching the landscape blur past. "Where will we go? What will we do?" Jake had clearly been thinking about this. "I've got a friend in Sacramento, owes me a favor from my Colorado days. He runs a horse ranch, breeding and training. I figure I can work for him, learn the business. You could help with the gentling and training if you wanted, or do whatever makes you happy. We'll build something together, Catherine. Something that's ours." The journey took them through New Mexico territory and into California, a week of trains and stagecoaches, and finally arriving in Sacramento in early summer. The city was booming with commerce and energy, utterly different from the desert ranch where Catherine had grown up. Jake's friend, a grizzled horse trainer named Tom Fletcher, welcomed them warmly and offered Jake work on the spot when he saw how Jake handled the horses. They rented a small house on the edge of town, simple but clean, with a porch that looked out over rolling hills. And on a Saturday afternoon, with Tom and his wife as witnesses, Jake and Catherine were married by a justice of the peace in a ceremony that was brief and legal and perfect. Catherine wore a simple blue dress bought ready-made from a shop. Jake wore his best shirt and the expression of a man who couldn't believe his luck, and when he kissed her at the end, she knew she had made the right choice. The first months were hard. Catherine missed her family with an ache that never quite went away, and the work at the ranch was physically demanding in ways she hadn't anticipated. But she loved it too, loved learning to train horses, loved the satisfaction of seeing a fractious animal gentle under her patient hands. Jake was beside her through everything, teaching her, supporting her, loving her with a devotion that never wavered. They wrote to her parents after 3 months when Catherine could no longer bear the silence. She sent a long letter explaining everything again, telling them about the marriage, about the life they were building, about how happy she was. For weeks there was no response, and Catherine tried to make peace with the possibility that her family might never forgive her. Then a letter arrived, her mother's handwriting on the envelope. Catherine's hands shook as she opened it, Jake reading over her shoulder. Her mother wrote that they had been devastated by her leaving, that her father had spent weeks trying to track them down, before finally accepting that Catherine had made her choice. But she also wrote that she and Thomas had been talking, long conversations late into the night about fear and love, and what it meant to be a parent. She wrote that Catherine's letter from her wedding had included a photograph, and seeing the joy on Catherine's face had forced her to acknowledge something she had been denying, that her daughter was truly, genuinely happy. The letter concluded with an invitation. Would Catherine and Jake come home for Christmas? Her father wanted to meet the man who had stolen his daughter's heart, wanted a chance to start over and perhaps, eventually, to forgive. Catherine cried when she read it, relief and joy and hope pouring through her. Jake held her close, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "What do you want to do?" "I want to go home," Catherine said. "Not to stay because this is our home now, but I want them to meet you properly. I want them to see what we've built together. And I want my father to know that you didn't ruin my life. You saved it." They made the journey back to Arizona territory that December, arriving at the ranch on Christmas Eve with snow dusting the distant mountains and the smell of pine in the air. Catherine's mother rushed out to meet them before they had even dismounted, pulling Catherine into an embrace that seemed to last forever. Her father emerged more slowly from the house, his expression guarded, and for a long moment he and Jake simply looked at each other. Then Thomas Hartwell extended his hand. "Mr. Morrison, thank you for bringing my daughter home, even if just for a visit." Jake shook it firmly. "Thank you for the invitation, sir. I know we didn't start off on the best footing, but I hope I can prove to you that I'll spend the rest of my life making Catherine happy." Over the next few days, Catherine watched her father and Jake circle each other warily, testing and evaluating. She watched Jake help with the ranch work without being asked, saw him handle the horses with the skill and care that had first caught her attention. She watched her father's expression soften as he observed how Jake treated Catherine, the respect and love clear in every word and gesture. On Christmas night, after dinner and presents and laughter, Thomas asked Jake to join him on the porch. Catherine waited anxiously inside until they returned an hour later, both men looking serious but no longer hostile. Her father came to her and took her hands. "You chose well, Catherine. I didn't want to see it before, but that young man loves you with everything he has. And more importantly, he respects you. He's building a good life for the two of you out in California, and I'm proud of you for having the courage to go after what you wanted, even when it meant defying me." Thomas's voice roughened with emotion. "I'm sorry I tried to keep you in a cage. I see now that I was wrong. Can you forgive me?" Catherine hugged her father tightly. "There's nothing to forgive. You were trying to protect me and I love you for it, but I'm glad you finally understand." They stayed through the new year, healing old wounds and building new bridges. When Catherine and Jake finally headed back to California, it was with her parents' blessing and promises to visit again soon. The ranch in Arizona would always be part of Catherine's past, but her future was in California with Jake, and knowing her family supported that made all the difference. The years that followed were good ones. Jake and Catherine worked hard at Tom Fletcher's ranch, saving money and learning everything they could about horse breeding and training. Catherine proved to have a natural talent for working with difficult horses, and her reputation grew. Jake became Tom's right-hand man, trusted and respected. 3 years after their marriage, Tom retired and offered to sell them the ranch at a price they could manage with their savings, and a loan from Catherine's father, who had become Jake's unlikely ally and supporter. They renamed it the Silver River Ranch after Jake's mare, who had brought them together, and threw themselves into building something that would last. Their first son was born in the spring of 1886, a healthy boy they named Thomas James after both their fathers, a gesture of reconciliation and hope. Catherine's parents made the journey to California to meet their grandson, and the joy on her mother's face as she held the baby erased the last lingering shadows of the past. More children followed. A daughter named Rose 2 years later, then another son they called Fletcher in honor of Tom, who had passed away peacefully the year before. The house that had seemed too big when Catherine and Jake first bought it filled with noise and laughter, with muddy boots and children's drawings and the organized chaos of a working ranch. Catherine taught all her children to ride as soon as they could walk, determined that they would grow up with the freedom she had fought so hard to reclaim. She and Jake worked side by side, equal partners in every aspect of their life together, and the ranch prospered under their joint management. Silver River became known throughout California for producing exceptional horses, and people came from as far as San Francisco to buy their stock. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Jake surprised Catherine with a trip back to the desert, just the two of them. They rode out into the wilderness beyond Tucson, finding the spot where they had first ridden together all those years ago. The saguaros stood unchanged, eternal sentinels under the endless sky. "Do you ever regret it?" Jake asked as they sat together watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. "Leaving your family, running away with a cowboy who had nothing but a horse and a dream." Catherine turned to look at him, at the face she loved more with every passing year, weathered now by sun and time but still beautiful to her. She thought about everything they had built together, the life they had created through courage and stubbornness, and love that refused to be denied. Not for a single moment, she said, and kissed him as the sun sank below the horizon. You gave me back my life, Jake Morrison. You gave me freedom and partnership and a love that makes everything else possible. How could I ever regret that? They rode back to town under the stars, hand in hand the way they had been from the beginning, and Catherine felt the same wild joy she had felt that first Sunday when Jake had saddled his best mare and said, "Let's go." The world was wide and full of possibility, and she had chosen to ride into it with this man beside her. 20 years after that first ride, Catherine stood on the porch of Silver River Ranch watching their grandchildren play in the yard. Thomas James had married a schoolteacher and taken over the day-to-day running of the ranch. Rose was training to be a veterinarian, one of the first women in the state to pursue that path, carrying on her mother's legacy in her own way. Fletcher was working as a horse trainer in Los Angeles, making a name for himself in the growing film industry, providing horses for Western pictures. Jake came out to join her, his hair silver now but his green eyes still bright. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, and they stood together in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the land they had built together. "Happy?" he asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. Catherine leaned back against him, feeling the solid strength that had never wavered in all their years together. She thought about the girl she had been, trapped and desperate and dying by inches behind the walls of other people's fear. She thought about the moment she had chosen to climb out that window and into an uncertain future. She thought about every sunrise and sunset since then, every challenge overcome, every joy celebrated, every moment of love that had brought her to this place. "Happier than I ever dreamed possible," she said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. The Silver River Ranch continued to thrive for generations, a testament to the courage of a woman who refused to be contained and a cowboy who had seen her heart and offered her the world. Catherine and Jake grew old together, surrounded by children and grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren, all of them raised with the understanding that love meant supporting each other's dreams, not restricting them. When Jake passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, Catherine held his hand and whispered all the words she had said 1,000 times before. "Thank you, I love you. You were the best thing that ever happened to me." She missed him with an ache that never faded, but she carried on because that was what they had always done together, carried on through everything, and she wanted to honor his memory by continuing to live fully until her own time came. She would tell the story often in those final years to anyone who would listen, especially young women who felt trapped by expectations or fear. She would tell them about a cowboy who saddled his best mare and offered freedom with 2 simple words, and about finding the courage to say yes, even when everything in the world said no. She would tell them that love was worth fighting for, that freedom was worth the risk, and that the only life worth living was the one you chose for yourself. Catherine passed away at 82, surrounded by family, with a photograph of Jake on the bedside table and a smile on her face. The Silver River Ranch continued on, run by her descendants, who made sure every visitor knew the story of how it began. With a forbidden girl and a cowboy who believed she deserved to be free, with one ride that changed everything, with a love that built a legacy. And sometimes, on clear desert nights, ranch hands swore they could see 2 riders on the horizon, galloping across the scrubland under the stars, forever young and forever free, riding toward a sunset that never quite arrived. Whether it was truth or legend, no one could say for certain, but it didn't matter. The story had become part of the land itself, woven into every fence post and water trough, a reminder that the greatest adventures begin with someone who sees you for who you really are and says, simply and completely, "Let's go."